So make sure that someone could be you. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters. Real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Very, very good evening to you and welcome to Farage on GB News. I'm Martin Dorby, standing in for the big man who's having a well-deserved day off, horsing around at Royal Ascot. On tonight's show,
I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks.
Within the past hour, President Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, confirms that America's decision to strike Iran will be made within the next 2 weeks. And France's plan to intercept people smugglers in the Channel is facing a legal threat after campaigners accuse authorities of dangerous tactics. Will we ever tackle the crisis in the Channel? All that to come on tonight's packed show, but first is news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. The top story just after 7 o'clock. As we heard there, Donald Trump has said he will decide within 2 weeks whether the United States will join Israeli military action against Iran as tensions in the region continue to escalate.
I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks."
Well, as you heard there, the White House saying there is still a substantial chance of negotiations, but Iran's deputy foreign minister has warned, quote, "This is not America's war." Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has urged Donald Trump to step back from any strikes, instead pushing for a diplomatic resolution. Well, it comes as the situation in Israel is deteriorating, a missile strike directly hitting a hospital, injuring 71 people. In response, Israel hit nuclear sites in Iran overnight, but so far there's been no report of any radiation leaks. In other news tonight, a former PhD student has been jailed for life for raping 10 women in London and China. 28-year-old Zhenhao Zhao was given a minimum term of 24 years after being found guilty of multiple rapes, voyeurism, drug offences and false imprisonment. The court heard he filmed most of the attacks, kept a box of the women's belongings, and only 3 of his 10 victims have been identified so far. One survivor said she was haunted by the attack. Since his conviction, 24 more people have come forward, and Zhao will not be eligible for release until 2048 at the earliest. The Bank of England has kept the interest rate on hold at 4.25% today as the cost of living remains under pressure from rising food prices, global instability and the threat of higher oil costs. Officials say the global economic outlook remains highly unpredictable, with unemployment creeping up and inflation still stubborn in some sectors. The decision comes as the Chancellor's autumn budget is continuing to weigh on business confidence and the jobs market. Speaking earlier, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves pledged at least £9 billion every year to tackle what she described as the soaring maintenance backlog across schools, hospitals and in prisons. Lord Michael Gove has told us here at GB News that Whitehall officials tried to block journalists from exposing the Rotherham grooming gang scandal. The former Conservative cabinet minister confirmed claims by Dominic Cummings, saying he personally rejected advice from officials at the Department for Education, who he says wanted to stop reports being published. He says civil servants were concerned about the potential reputational damage that stories could provide. Here's what he had to say to us earlier today.
Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council at the time didn't want the full details revealed. They approached the government and the Department for Education, where I was Secretary of State at the time, asked us to join them in a legal case in order to prevent the Times publishing. I looked at the material alongside Dominic and some other people in the department, and we contacted Rotherham Council and we said, yes, we will intervene in this case, but on behalf of the Times, because it's absolutely vital that the truth be told.
Well, it was 30.1 degrees, then 30.8. I can now confirm 32.2 degrees has been recorded today. The hottest day of the year so far. That is in Kew in Heathrow in London. That's as a heat wave is beginning to take hold. Amber heat health alerts are now also in place across all of England, with warnings of pressure on the NHS and care services. Forecasters could say we could see even 34 degrees this weekend, with official status of heatwave already declared in some areas. Fire services are also urging people to take extra care near open water and to check on your elderly neighbours and relatives. Those are the latest headlines. I'll hand you straight back now to Martin.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome to Farage with me, Martin Dalby. Now, tonight, President Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said that the president will make a decision on whether to order a strike within the next 2 weeks.
The ongoing situation in Iran. I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks."
There we go. The goalposts have shifted once again, and I'm joined now by the US journalist Hadley Gamble. Hadley, welcome to the show. Yesterday, Donald Trump had the world on its watch, saying it might be within the week, it might be before the end of the week. Now it's 2 weeks, and I guess, isn't this the playbook by Donald Trump? We tuned into that press conference tonight, perhaps expecting nuclear war. Instead, we got another pregnant pause of 2 weeks. Is this just all the art of the deal?
Well, it's also certainly what we now tend to call the taco trade, as it with Donald Trump, is he chickening out, if you will? This is a situation that just to give you a bit of a broader perspective, as you know, I spent 15, 20 years covering the Middle East, living in the Middle East. No one is going to be crying any tears over the Ayatollah or a regime change, but they would, of course, be deeply concerned about what happens after that kind of action, after that regime change. Who's going to come next? The destabilization of the region. We've seen it again and again, and certainly the Americans in particular do not have the greatest track record for installing or trying to install new governments in the Middle East. So there is a lot of fear about that. Also, what we've seen with oil prices, well, higher oil prices are good for Gulf Arab economies, of course, and the other economies in the region that they support, like Egypt, like Jordan, like Lebanon. But at the end of the day, they also want price stability. And when you see the kinds of price pops that we've been witnessing with Brent up near $80 a barrel at this point, that's something that's concerning, of course, to oil ministers. So there is concern in the Middle East. And then more broadly, I'm sitting here in St. Petersburg in Russia. We've heard from President Putin even suggesting that he could mediate some kind of agreement between the United States, between between Israel and Iran. You know, there's a huge cultural and economic history between Russia and Iran. The Iranians have been supplying them with drones and other equipment throughout the last 3 years of this invasion of Ukraine. So, you know, they've got a lot riding on this as well, because at the end of the day, that would be another capital that they've lost in the last 3 years in the Middle East. So the Russians have acted, you know, according to their economic and foreign policy goals. The Middle East is waiting with bated breath, as I say. And then for Donald Trump sitting in the White House, I mean, the calculus has got to be whether or not he can achieve what he wants to achieve. And at the same point, not lose half the people that supported him. And of course, I'm talking about his MAGA supporters like Trucker and Marjorie Taylor Greene, essentially saying that they are very unhappy with the president's current way of thinking.
Yeah, you raise a great point there, because there is something of an internal war within the Republican Party about the ability, the desire to go to war. Of course, Donald Trump came in saying, I am a president of peace. I am not a president of war. But is this that unique opportunity? I mean, to get widespread peace in the Middle East, an Ayatollah with a nuclear bomb would be a disaster for the area and the entire planet.
No doubt. And you know, you take a step back and look what's happened over the last couple of administrations. I mean, you know, for years now, we've been hearing, you know, whether it be the JCPOA or the failure of the JCPOA to push the Iranians to do the right thing, what they promised to do. These latest IEA reports essentially saying, you guys, we know you're cheating. And instead of going to the table at that point, when Iran, frankly, has been backed into a corner, given what we've seen since October 7th, Hezbollah, Hamas, that Shia crescent that we've talked about for years being completely demolished by the Israelis. They're at a low point. They should have taken the deal. Look what happens when people don't take Donald Trump's deals. And I'm talking, of course, about the Abraham Accords. The poor Palestinians, it was their last best chance for a great deal. And look what has happened to them since. So, you know, if you're sitting in Tehran, the political calculus there would be perhaps, you know, if you can get to Geneva this weekend, tomorrow, and negotiate with the Europeans to talk to him on your behalf, that might just be your last best chance to get something done, because this is a man who likes to get a deal done. And, you know, he extended the olive branch and they slapped it away.
Hadley Gamble, we have a quick second clip I'd like to play now, because Caroline Levitt was asked about trust in Donald Trump. Let's take a little look.
Trust in President Trump. President Trump has incredible instincts, and President Trump kept America and the world safe in his first term as president in implementing a peace through strength foreign policy agenda. He has given great latitude and given a lot of effort to achieving a diplomatic solution. He will make a decision within 2 weeks.
So Hadley Gamble, there we go, still seems a little bit sitting on the fence, quite uncharacteristic for those of us who are used to firm action. But if this 2-week window expires, you can't imagine Donald Trump being much in the mood to negotiate with an Ayatollah who's on a war footing himself.
I think he's just giving himself a little bit more time. You remember that during the first administration, I was sitting in the Gulf when there was threats to shipping, and there was an opportunity for Donald Trump to have a very, very strong and firm response. And we've got the whole Fifth Fleet there, you know, and he didn't do a thing. He backed away because at the end of the day, again, we had heard from him on multiple occasions saying peace through strength. I don't want to take action. And of course, this is something he was elected a second time on, this idea that America does not need to involve itself in more foreign conflicts. So perhaps he's cheering on Netanyahu, he's cheering on the Israelis, because he is, quite understandably, very upset with the Iranians refusing either to make a deal with him or at least to come to the negotiating table in some way, you know, willing to give something when it comes to backing away from a nuclear weapon. And at the same point, you've got to understand that, you know, this is a president who needs a win. Think about it from that perspective. You know, he does need a foreign policy win. He was going to end the war in Ukraine in a day. He was going to do a multitude of other things, and those things haven't materialized. So this is a guy looking for a win.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Excellent, as ever, US journalist Hadley Gamble. Thanks for joining us on the show. Let's get the reaction now from my panel. I'm joined by the former Conservative MP Tom Hunt and GBNews' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Tom Hunt, I shall turn to you first. Presumably you'd like to see swift action to get rid of the Ayatollah.
I mean, this is one of the most horrific regimes in the world, if not the most horrific regime in the world, which poses a really significant danger to the West and to the UK, the US and our allies. And that's without a nuclear weapon. I mean, we look at some of the destruction and the evil that regime has spread. The idea of them having a nuclear weapon, it's incredibly alarming. So if there is an opportunity to smash a regime, to crush it, and to get rid of its ability to have a nuclear weapon within the near term, I think that would be an opportunity that should be taken.
And yet, Nigel Nelson, that's an opportunity that Sir Keir Starmer once again seems to be sitting on the fence about. De-escalate, he says. How would de-escalating get rid of this despot that's got a nuclear bomb now?
Well, first of all, I think you have to actually worry about the consequences of regime change. We have no idea what sort of regime will come afterwards. Look what happened in Iraq.
Can't be worse than this lot, can it?
Well, it wasn't Iraq. We ended up with ISIS because we left a complete power vacuum in Iraq after the war there. And then, again, looking at Iraq, that we said Iraq had WMD. It didn't. At the moment, there is no published evidence that Iran actually is near making a bomb. We know they've got to enrich uranium.
There's no media access in Iran. They have an army enforcing, as we speak, martial law on the streets. You can't trust what they tell us.
It may well it's not quite a question of what they tell us. These are independent international atomic authorities who are looking at what Iran's got. They haven't got the evidence to say that the bomb is there. Now, it doesn't mean there isn't actually intelligence either in America or Israel. They actually are a few months away from making a bomb. We don't actually know that. But at the moment, I think you have to think just really carefully about your consequences. And if you do go in, you empower people like Kim Jong-un in North Korea. He looks around the world and sees what happens to places that don't have nuclear weapons and will redouble his efforts to actually make his.
But, Tom, it's fair to say that in the last regime, little rocket man, Kim Jong-un, was kept totally in check by this unpredictability, this brinksmanship of Donald Trump. Isn't that the point? Donald Trump can change his mind at the drop of a hat, and that keeps psychopaths like the Ayatollah in check.
Well, look, it's very fashionable for various people in this sort of liberal elite, sort of chattering classes to sort of attack President Trump and to say that he's no good, he's dangerous, etc. But I'd just say, look at the record. And I say, look at his record as president in his first time he was president is 4 years, and compare that to President Biden's tenure. I think with President Biden, we had an incredibly weak US. We had a regime that oozed weakness, and I think it was taken advantage of as a consequence of that. I don't think anyone would say that President Trump is weak. I think there is an unpredictability there. I'm not saying he gets everything right. But I said if you give me a choice between President Trump or Kamala Harris or President Biden, I think I know who I'd pick.
And I wonder if that's the same when we look at politics domestically. It just seems to be that every conflict thus far is, let's stay away from Israel, let's not support Israel, let's not support America now, not saying militarily, but at least in the war of words. Sir Keir Starmer doesn't seem like much of an ally to our closest relation in the United States?
Well, at the moment, nothing's actually happened. We don't know if President Trump does decide to go in. And look at that word, within 2 weeks. It's not in 2 weeks. It could be any time between now and then. But if he does go in, that's a whole different ballgame as far as Keir Starmer's concerned about, because we are meant to be America's closest ally. I think that the de-escalation line is the best bet at the moment, because we don't want a major war. We don't want the whole region to erupt, all of which are the dangers of this. And what is quite good from what Trump's done tonight is he's talking about negotiations. If they actually work, great. I mean,
I think on that, we're saying we don't want the region to erupt. The region is erupting, and it has erupted consistently for the last few years. And a massive reason for that has been the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime is a cancer in the region. And from what I can see, it needs to be removed as quickly as possible. And I don't think there's a difference between an appalling regime that commits atrocities within its country and is really bad to its own people, and one like Iran, but does that, is terrible to women, etc., but is also poses an existential threat to our country. I genuinely believe that if the Iranian regime had the ability to crush the UK and to wipe us off the face of the planet, it would do that.
But what do you replace it with?
Well, I think something far less threatening.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the problem. We take out regimes. We took them out in Libya. We took the regime out in Iraq.
It's a
look
false
what happened
comparison.
to Afghanistan.
It is a false comparison. You can look at Libya, and did Libya pose an existential threat to the UK and to the West?
Yes.
I don't think it did.
Well, it did. I mean, they didn't support the RO all the way through, sending weapons there.
Iran, yeah, but not on the scale that Iran could.
No, they didn't have any WMD that would actually threaten us. But I think that had they had it, that Libya would have been a threat. Had Saddam Hussein had it, would he have been a threat?
There is no realistic possibility. There is no realistic possibility Libya would ever have nuclear weapons to the extent, but it is realistic that Iran could.
And that's it. Isn't that the point? The Ayatollah could be a nuclear threat. It's a different threat. It's a threat that's arming Hamas. It's a threat that's arming Hezbollah. It's a threat to the entire region. Perhaps the stakes are higher and the response should be higher too. Nigel, Tom, thank you very much. Excellent stuff. Now, coming up next, France's plan to intercept people smugglers in the Channel is again facing a legal threat. This time after campaigners accuse authorities of dangerous tactics. But it gets worse. It's a British charity trying to stop the French doing their job. That's next.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Well, in the past few minutes, Meghan Markle has paid a sweet tribute to Princess Lilibet as she turns 4 today. It comes just a day after the Duchess of Sussex said she'd love to go into business with her daughter in the future.
Well, that's all it is, another money-making effort there. That's to make up for nobody buying her jam. I mean, do you really care if you see a picture of her kid or not? You do, that's it.
I'd like to see her face, to be honest.
I don't. Now, back to Diana, of course, who was a real star and style icon and whatever. And one day I can remember I complimented her on her outfit that she was wearing, and it was the same colour as the outfit you were wearing yesterday.
Bottle green?
No. RUC green, Royal Ulster Constabulary green, as she pointed out to me. She said, yes, RUC green, what do you think? And then she went into a whole, literally, sob story. She started crying about a bomb explosion there had been in Northern Ireland or whatever. She was very, very close, very connected with all of that. But, yeah, so...
And knowledgeable as well, by the sound of things,
She was very knowledgeable, yeah. And then she went on to talk about William and Harry going to school and how that upset her, and they went to boarding school or whatever it is. So we talked about all those things. And I forgot why I was going to tell you that story, but there was some reason. But she was... it was the same colour as what you were wearing yesterday, anyway, the green.
And she was so lovely by the sounds of things.
She was film star status. I mean, you just saw her in a room and you would go...
Wow.
She's special, yeah, she's special.
And I think whoever that was speaking in that report there saying, one of the designers, I think it was the designer of the wedding dress, saying it was just clothes or just a dress, but then Diana wore it and then it was something special. Absolutely. And it became part of history. And that's exactly what happened.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, your stand-in man for Nigel Martin-Daubry. I've got some time for some of your thoughts now. Ronnie says this: only fools rush in. Trump is right, delaying his decision for 2 weeks. Olga adds this: if Iran succeed using the nuclear weapon against Israel, guess who will next? They will next come after. Will it stop at Israel? One could only wish. And finally, Kevin says this: why has no one mentioned the lies before the Iraq war? Maybe we're seeing a rerun of that. Or are they not allowed to talk about the lies before the Iraq war and the thousands who died? Kevin there, of course, referring to that dodgy dossier, as it became known as the weapons of mass destruction in the fullness of time turned out not to even exist. Now, moving on, France is finally getting tough on illegal channel crossings, or is it? Because they say they're planning to stop migrant boats just 300 metres from their own coast. But quelle surprise, the same activist lawyers who blocked Britain's Rwanda plan are already threatening to drag France through the courts if they dare to step up. Care for Calais, yes, that lot again. They claim that the move could be deadly and are gearing up for a fresh legal battle. Meanwhile, the boats keep on coming in. And with Macron heading to London for crunch talks next month, the pressure is on both sides of the channel. I'm joined now by the Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby, and of course that is Sarah Pochin. Ms Pochin, welcome to the show. So here we go again. We pay £500 million a year to the French. They finally say they're going to stop boats. I believe that when I see it. And to their rescue comes Care for Calais, a British charity trying to stop the French doing their job. What's your thoughts?
It's a disgrace, isn't it? These people, I mean, where do they come from, this Care for Calais? They clearly don't care for the United Kingdom and our great country, which, quite frankly, if we continue in the way we're going, is going to be unrecognisable by the end of this Labour government. But in terms of France, so, you know, putting Care for Calais to one side, France has agreed now that it will actually go 300 metres away from their beaches and go and get these people and turn them round. Well, I'd like to see that. Well, at least I won't believe that until I see it. It's just not going to happen unless we get tough on the French, unless we do something dramatic like take away their fishing rights or something that they really care about, which, by the way, of course, the Labour government has given them another 12 years on fishing in our waters. Well, let's do something like that. Let's take away their fishing rights and make them do something about this problem, because until we get serious with them, they're just going to carry on waving this lot over. And it's not small boats. You've got small boats on the screen. That's not small boat in your text. You can change that text to a large boat. That boat I'm looking at's probably got, I don't know, 50 on it at least. These aren't small boats. These are large boats. This is organised crime, and we need to crack down on it.
Sarah Pochin, it's often struck me as funny, almost, that all the people in the channel seem to belong to the United Kingdom and all the fish in the channel seem to belong to France. And we're stuck in this terrible bind.
I love that. That is so funny. Do you know what? I'm going to use that again because I couldn't agree with you more. And that just sums up, doesn't it, the situation that we are in as a country. We have got one of the smallest borders, one of the narrowest channels, waterways, and we cannot control our borders. But we could. Martin, we know we could if the government had the will to control the borders. We have border force. You know, we could take them all off of our beaches and deport them to a centre and process them there. The government, and the Tory government before, chose not to.
So, Sarah Pochin, you're saying that a price worth paying to take back control of our borders is to take away the French fishermen's rights to fish in British waters. That would hurtle us towards a full-blown diplomatic trade war with the French.
Well, bring it on, because at the moment we're paying the French millions, aren't we, to control these people, these illegal immigrants, because that's what they are, leaving French shores. And they're just pocketing our millions, our taxpayers' money. So that's you and me and everyone else that pays their taxes. They're taking our taxpayers' money, hard-earned in our cases, and I'm sure everyone else's cases, and doing nothing with it. They're still, you know, waving these people through. Now, come on, this is not difficult to do. You've just got to have the will to do it. The Conservative government hasn't had the will to do it for 14 years, and this Labour government, 40,000 have come in this way illegally on big boats, because that's what we should now be calling them, since the Labour government got in power last July. And look at this heat wave. I mean, I don't know, I've actually come back to Runcorn today, but golly, I am boiling. I'm sure you're boiling in London. So we're in a heat wave. These boats, these big boats packed, are going to keep coming across and across and across for the next few days.
Sarah, talking about sizzling, could I have a bit of fun here? You made it onto a sexiest MPs list this week, but let's not get too carried away. So did Lee Anderson. I said, who conducted this research? Specsavers?
gosh, Martin, I hope you're talking about Lee and not me. I was actually really quite excited. I've never been on a sexy, I've never been on a sexy list before. So I thought, wow, that's the funniest thing that's happened to me in the last 6 weeks. So there you go.
Well, enjoy the moment while it lasts. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. That's the Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby, Sarah Poaching. Great fun. Thank you. Now I'm joined back in the studio, of course, for reaction by the former Tory MP Tom Hunt and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, I heard you gasp there when Sarah Poaching said, yeah, well, let's take some action here by kicking the French out of British fishing waters.
Yeah, I did, absolutely. I mean, it's nonsense. First of all, you're talking about completely different things. We're talking about a deal with the French about small boats crossing the Channel. The fishing rights are to do with a trade deal with the EU. You start blending them all together and we'll end up with just complete chaos. So let's deal with the boats.
You've got chaos now.
Well, we haven't got chaos as far as the trade deal is concerned. We've finally got a reasonable trade deal with the EU, and part of that is the French fishing rights, which they have for 12 years. It still means that they only get less fish than they did when we were actually in the EU.
OK, Tom Hunt, let's bring you in here. It seems like one-way traffic in the Channel. The immigrants are coming to Britain, the fish are going to France, and part of the deal in that trade deal was meant to be that 12 years extra access allowed us to take part in this arms negotiation deal. Turns out the French won't even allow us that. Is the problem here not care for Calais? The problem is that France don't like us.
Well, look, I mean, I think, in a sense, I mean, a bit of this debate's, I think, a bit of a distraction. You know, I don't think we should be looking to France to sort our problem out. I actually think if we did things like leave ECHR, we'd have our own powers within our own control to deal with this. You know, the moment they arrive here, they can be deported to an offshore processing site, whether that's a Rwanda scheme that actually works and actually sends people to Rwanda. I mean, I think that would provide a meaningful deterrent. You know, the French will never help us on this. It's not in their interest to help us on this.
So why give them £500 million a year?
Well, we shouldn't be giving them £500 million a year. I mean, I was actually pretty vocal when I was a Conservative MP, and I said that we shouldn't be doing that. The only thing that will sort this problem out will be a strong deterrent. And for me, that would be, you know, leaving the ECHR, leaving any kind of agreement that restricts our ability to take robust action on this, and deport illegal migrants. Well, I don't even want them to be processed, because actually, if they enter our country illegally, under no circumstances should they stay. They've broken our immigration law. They're a criminal. They should be deported. They should never have an opportunity to be here. You know, the French, for our own reasons... They're
not criminals. There's nothing illegal about crossing the Channel in a small boat.
They've broken our immigration law. They've illegally entered our country. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Most people in this country see them for what they are. They've broken our immigration law. They've illegally entered our country. They have no right to be here. Yes, they have.
But I'm sorry that they haven't.
Yes, they have.
There's nothing illegal about crossing the Channel in a small boat.
Yes, there is.
To claim asylum. But if the asylum is refused, they could be prosecuted for not having the correct documents. But actually crossing the Channel is not illegal. What the law says is they're inadmissible, which is completely different.
Well, look, OK, the British people are looking at this year after year. They're seeing thousands of people, mostly men, come from a safe country, which is France, where they failed to claim asylum. These people are not refugees.
But they don't come from France.
They've got no right to be... They've got no right to be here.
And actually... They come through France to try and get...
Why haven't they claimed asylum in France and the numerous other safe countries they've come from? Because they're not refugees. They want things like better benefits, etc. OK, let's stop with that lie. And actually, the British public is sick of talking about this. They're sick of talking about it. They're sick of seeing the Justice Secretary yesterday talking about ECHR reform. It ain't going to happen. You have to get every single member of the ECHR to agree to any kind of reform. We need to leave ECHR and start delivering for British people and stopping this illegal migration.
We end up like Russia and Belarus.
Such a poor example. And Australia. What are all the other countries who aren't in the ECHR? Australia? They're all over the world.
Australia isn't in Europe.
I'm sorry, there are so many countries around the world that are established democracies that are not in the ECHR.
No, because they're not in Europe. And the whole point is it's a European convention.
But they're not in an equivalent. They're not in an equivalent convention for their part of the world that inhibits their ability to make decisions.
If they're members of the UN, they are.
Gentlemen, feisty stuff. But we literally have to call time there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Beautiful. Now, today we learned that doctors want to walk out of work when the weather hits, the temperature goes up. But what about the brickie roasting on a rooftop in 30-degree heat? There's the answer. Don't get ill when there's a heat wave, because the NHS won't be there. That's my debate next.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, lots of hot sunshine across Italy, and we may spark a few heavy thundery showers in Sicily over the next day or so. There's a weather system sitting away to the west of Portugal, but its weather front could introduce a bit more cloud in Madeira during Friday and Saturday. A few showers inland over Spain, but most of the coasts dry and sunny. There are those heavy showers in southern Italy. Much of the eastern Mediterranean dry, fine and sunny. It'll stay sunny in Barcelona and Nice throughout the weekend. Goodbye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Been hot today, but tomorrow, for many of us, likely to be a little bit hotter. Plenty of hazy sunshine. The chance of 1 or 2 thunderstorms. High pressure is still in control at the moment, but low pressure is edging in, and that is just mixing things up a little bit, providing more cloud. 1 or 2 thunderstorms possible for Northern Ireland and south of Scotland this evening, and later tonight over South Wales and southwest England. Again, you might get woken up by a rumble of thunder. For most of it, it's just a dry night, a very warm night though. Temperatures really holding up. A sticky one, difficult one for sleeping. 17, 18 the low in most towns and cities, maybe no lower than 19 across parts of South Wales and southwest England. So a warm start to a hot day. A bit more cloud around tomorrow. The sunshine likely to be a little bit hazier compared to today. And again, the chance of 1 or 2 isolated thunderstorms breaking out. Initially over Wales and southwest England, most other areas starting dry. Probably a warmer day tomorrow for Northern Ireland, much of Scotland. Quite a few degrees higher, the temperatures here. Still quite a bit of cloud at times from an old weather front across parts of the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Then, as I say, as we go through the day, a bit more cloud around, so the sunshine will be a little more hazy, but those temperatures will still tick up. And we could just see again 1 or 2 thunderstorms, very hit and miss. Most places won't see them, but parts of western England, Wales. And come the afternoon, northern Scotland could just catch a thunderstorm too, as temperatures here get close to 30 Celsius and further south, widely over 30 degrees across the heart of the country. 31, 32 likely to be the top temperature. Could reach 33 or 34 on Saturday, but a greater chance on Saturday of seeing some vicious thunderstorms, particularly for Wales, later the Midlands and northern England too. So that's something to watch for Saturday. The peak of the heat on Saturday, maybe 33, perhaps 34 across the east, but it is going to turn cooler from the west and temperatures lowering for all of us by Sunday.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back now. This evening at 9 p.m, of course, it's Patrick Christie's night, and the star of the show, the formidable Patrick Christie, joins me now. Pat, what's on your menu?
Well, loads on this evening, Martin. So how do we get the Pakistani authorities to take back their rapists and their paedophiles? I've got a few ideas. I'm going to be dishing that out at 10 p.m. But the star of tonight's show is an Afghan war veteran who was actually shot by the Taliban. He needs specialist care, and he can't get a house. Any guesses why? Because Afghan refugees have moved into the asylum hotel and are taking up local accommodation as well. Our priorities in this country are all topsy-turvy. Oh, and the NHS is apparently threatening to go on strike because it's a bit hot. So we'll be talking about that and much, much more as well.
Punchy as ever, Patrick Christie's, and that story with the homeless veteran is an excellent story. Well done. That's a great get. 9 o'clock tonight, Patrick Christie's. So, on that story, the British Medical Association wants doctors to have the right to down tools if the temperature in their surgeries gets a bit too toasty. That's right, they're calling for strike action if the office fan can't keep up. Pathetic. But here's a question. Where's the break for the brickie sweating it out or on a scaffolding in 30-degree heat? Where's the right to switch off for the plumber stuck in a boiling loft or the roofer with the sun beating down on his back all day? Now, my dad was a coal miner, 47 years. Temperatures down there could hit 40 degrees. They drink 8 pints of water and never go to the toilet because they sweated it all out. They just cracked on. They dug for Britain, and that is the work ethic that built this country. So how come that the NHS considered down tools because it gets a bit too hot for them? Well, I'm now joined by a tradie famously known as Mr. Pothole, Mark Morrell. Mark, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company as ever. No doubt you saw this story as I did and thought, what planet are these people on? The rest of us have got to crack on when the temperature goes up. Why are the NHS any different?
I mean, I actually had an assessment in a nurse's room the other day where the blinds were pulled, the fan was on. It was hotter than a steam room, to be fair to them. I think it's about lack of investment in that environment. But yeah, as you said about temperatures, having worked on the roads, the ambient temperature can be sort of 36 degrees, but the actual tarmac temperature can be up to sort of 65, 70 degrees. And it's at 50 degrees, it actually starts to melt. So when you use a rock drill in there, the head of it gets locked in and the actual rock drill nearly twists your arms off, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably why there's no potholes getting filled. It's too hot. There's any excuse for them to not do that as well. Isn't this the point, though? Now, why is the NHS so special? Now, if you get heat stroke and you fall ill, if you're a pensioner who gets heat stroke, in what planet, in which country, is it even appropriate for people that should be treating our sickest and our neediest simply decide they're going to down tools and clear off for a cold coffee?
Yeah, I don't agree with the strike thing. I think the pressure should be about getting facilities suitable for people, because it's not only the doctors. I mean, in some of the hospitals, in some of the wards, it can be atrocious for the patients, and you've got elderly patients available. So there's a bigger issue there. I don't agree with the striking. I think we actually need to look at other things in terms of it. But you're quite right. I mean, people were working in blast foundries. Well, when we had them before the government decided to shut them down, you're talking up to 50 degrees temperatures. But it needs to be appropriate. As you said, people outside, it's very, very difficult. I've actually worked with flame retardant overalls, cutting off live gas supplies in a hole where in sort of 30-odd degrees temperature, not the most sort of comfortable positions, but you have to get on with it and actually use water to cool things down. You have to adapt to certain things. But as I said, I'm not for the strike thing, but I think they need to look at the investment into the infrastructure. Government spent billions on vanity projects, but we can't even keep a hospital ward cool.
Yeah, just buy a bigger fan. Mark Morrell, always known as Mr. Pothole, thank you for your company. Always a pleasure. Let's get back to the studio now. Let's join the former Tory MP Tom Hunt and GBNews' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, I want to start with you. What a pathetic country we live in if it's seriously an option that NHS staff can clock off because it's too hot. It's ridiculous.
Well, hang on a sec. I mean, I think I would agree with Mark just a second ago. Buildings should actually be at the appropriate temperature for the people who are in them. And that certainly should apply to hospitals. I mean, if
turn the aircon down.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is that if those buildings overheat because they're old, because they were built in the 1960s, what you need is the investment in infrastructure to get proper buildings. So they do have air conditioning. If a vulnerable patient ends up in a ward where the temperature goes above 26 degrees, that patient is at risk. And what we're talking about here is not doctors walking out en masse. We're talking about non-essential staff being able to clock off, as you put it, in the event the temperature gets out of hand.
But if non-essential staff clock off, Tom Hunt, it's going to put the workload on essential staff. We'll all be getting seen less often. Do you sometimes think, Tom Hunt, that this country is just becoming a laughing stock? You know, we've won 2 world wars. You know, we were once leading the way, Rule Britannia. Now it's a bit hot. We're all clocking off. It's ridiculous.
But in so many ways, our country and our society at the moment is very, very sick. I'll be honest about that. And I I think we are quite fortunate in this country. We don't have many. Actually, I say fortunate or unfortunate, depending on whether you like hot weather or not. But we don't have that many days of the year where it's sort of this hot. It's quite rare. So we're talking about a few days of the year where it's a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, by all means, if the buildings and the facilities, we all want our NHS workers to be looked after, and if they're a bit too hot, let's look at investing in that. But look, I think the idea of people taking off days off work, going on strike because it's a bit too hot, I just think is ridiculous. But of course, it will almost certainly happen. We have a Labour government at the moment. He seems to be pretty pro that sort of stuff. So I expect that we'll be hearing in a few weeks about how this is OK. And about how we're going to have another bill by Angela Rayner, which is going to make this acceptable.
And isn't that the point? And if the unions get a sniff of any chance of down tools, it'll be too cold next week. It'll be too windy the week after.
In fact,
there'll be the wrong snow. There'll be the wrong rain. There'll be the wrong leaves. That's the point. Any excuse to have a tea break. That's what Britain's become.
There is actually a legal minimum for if it's too cold. So that's 16 degrees or 13 degrees if you're doing physical work. There is no legal maximum, which is where it becomes slightly difficult to work out how to go and do it. What it seems to me in a situation like this is, I think Tom's absolutely right. What we should be doing is investing in the hospitals to make sure that they have got a proper temperature. But I mean, in the event that it is too hot to work, and it could be dangerous, if you're making medical decisions or whatever, it could be really dangerous if you're overheating, then yes, if you're not essential...
But it never gets too hot to die, it never gets too hot to collapse of heat stroke, but it will be too hot for anybody to be there to treat them.
Those people who are collapsing of heat stroke would always have a doctor there to treat them.
I just think this country is a laughingstock. I honestly do. We're even having these conversations. Nobody wants people to be dropping dead in the workplace.
But shouldn't we have workplaces that actually are comfortable? I mean, we're in a comfortable studio at the moment where it's really hot outside. Why is it impossible
so do the same with the NHS.
Exactly. Do the same for the NHS.
Into it.
Absolutely. Let's make sure that the buildings are actually suitable for what they're there for.
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. Nigel Nelson, pleasure. Tom Hunt, I still think we're a laughingstock. But look, coming up next, students have been told to brace for shocking views in class. Once again, we're a pathetic country, as tough new free speech rules mean that university students will have to sit down and listen to opinions they don't agree with. Oh, they might go on strike. That's after the break.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dordme, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. This is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Daldmy as your stand-in. Now, students must be ready to face uncomfortable and even shocking views as the UK's higher education watchdog rolls out tough new free speech rules. Now, from Gaza rows at Cambridge to gender clashes, the Office for National Statistics says that unis must stop silencing legal opinions, while new figures show that 1 in 5 academics feel too afraid to teach hot-button topics. Well, let's get back to the studio. I'm still with the former Tory MP Tom Hunt and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Gentlemen, I had the head of free speech at the Office for Students, Arif Ahmed, on my show earlier. It's his responsibility to do this. And I said, well, how would it work? Would it be, for example, sitting down a snowflake and making them write an essay in defence of Nigel Farage? Would it be taking a trans activist and saying, write a paper defending J.K. Rowling? He said, yeah. Sounds like a great idea.
It is a great idea. That is, I mean, it's a superb idea. You should actually be able to put a contrary point of view. And that's the whole point of university, isn't it? To actually, it's not to teach you what to think, you're going to learn how to think. What I'm surprised about is that given universities are meant to be the home of free speech, where a load of controversial ideas are shared there, why this was even necessary in the first place. But clearly it was, because we've seen several lecturers who've lost their jobs because of it, people being low-platformed. Universities should be open to controversial and even offensive ideas.
Except they're not, because campuses are now populated by a monolithic culture of liberalism and left-wing politics. Professor Matt Goodwin is one of the few conservative academics probably in Christendom. Isn't that the point? It's like universities are now full of lefties, and the very fact they're being told to sit down and actually countenance there could be an alternative viewpoint shows that we've lost the plot.
Well, I think I missed some of the really crazy stuff because I'm now 36. So I think when I was at university, it hadn't gone completely out of control at that point. But look, this Office for Students report, there's some sensible stuff in it, but I believe it when I see it. Because the reality is, I find it hard to see you're going to get meaningful change without a government that is going to back up reports like that. And from what I can see, you're never going to get a Labour government taking a stand on a rule, right kind of stand on this. So I'm sad, I'm not going to get my hopes up.
I wonder if that's the point, Nigel. They'll go on strike. There's no way that these kind of blue-haired students are actually going to say, yeah, I'll sit down and defend Brexit. I'll sit down and defend Donald Trump. They take to the fainting camp.
It just strikes me that should be part of the course. I mean, that's a good way of actually learning. But the whole thing about this country is we're pretty good on free speech. I mean, we even allow things like...
We're not good at all.
Well, we are. We don't have a blasphemy law.
Oh, really?
Even atrocious ideas like Holocaust denial is not a criminal offence, which it is in 19 other countries. So, on the whole, we're pretty good. Universities have suffered badly because of what has happened.
J.D. Vance doesn't agree with you. Donald Trump doesn't agree with you. A great many defenders of free speech in the United Kingdom don't agree with you. A lot of people think, Tom Hunt, we have a perilous state of affairs.
There's a crisis when it comes to free speech in this country. There's an absolute, and I think most people would think that. You know, I remember being reported for a non-crime hate incident myself for making a comment about crime in the town centre I was representing. You know, we've got non-crime, we've got people being reported for making comments that are very reasonable that most people would agree with and coming up in their DBS checks. You know, free speech is not in a good place in this country, and I think we've got to be honest about that. But this Office for Students, I applaud this guy's publisher's report. Some of the stuff sounds sensible, but we're not going to get meaningful change. The students for universities, they will not follow what's in that report. And until we get a government but is prepared to lead on this and back up this guy's published this report, you're not going to see change.
And I wonder, actually, Nigel, if Sir Keir Starmer should be forced on one of these courses, he might then turn around and think, well, actually, people who disagree with me aren't far right.
Well, I mean, I think he's a bit busy to go back to university at the moment, so that's
But he's been putting women in jail for having opinions on Facebook. It isn't like, how can you say that free speech is a good place when mothers are in jail for Facebook?
It's when people like J.D. Vance accuse us of that free speech doesn't exist here, and yet his administration, Donald Trump, is refusing to allow a major news agency to get material from the White House on the basis they won't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America.
They're not in jail.
They're not in jail, but is that not an infringement of free speech? If the Associated Press can't say we want to call the Gulf of Mexico what it's always been called, where's the freedom there when they can't operate in the White House?
I don't really think it's a comparable point. But anyway, Nigel Nelson, always superb, and Tom Hunt, thank you for joining us tonight, of course. Coming up next is State of the Nation, and one of those academics who's a Conservative is joining us now. Professor Matt Goodwin, State Nation is up next. What's on your menu?
Yeah, we've got a really great show tonight, Martin. We are going live to Tel Aviv. We've got Winston Marshall on the ground, of course, former Mumford & Sons musician. He's going to be telling us what is the mood music in Israel, what's going to happen next. We're going to be talking to Melanie Phillips, Times columnist and author, and I'm going to be having a pretty fiery debate with a human rights lawyer about this idea that we should be using visa penalties and maybe foreign aid cuts to force Pakistan to take back these bad apples who have been involved in the rape gangs.
A lot of people think that's a sensible notion, because the diplomatic idea that we should be allowing flights to reopen from Pakistan into Britain in some sort of horse trading for them to take back rapists and paedophiles is astonishing. That's where we're at. State of the Nation is up next. Don't miss that. And of course, Nigel Farage is away at Royal Ascot. I hear he bought himself a fancy silk hat. Well, hats off to you, Nigel. You'll be back next week. Next is State of the Nation. Have a great evening.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Been hot today, but tomorrow, for many of us, likely to be a little bit hotter. Plenty of hazy sunshine, a chance of 1 or 2 thunderstorms. High pressure is still in control at the moment, but low pressure is edging in, and that is just mixing things up a little bit, providing more cloud. 1 or 2 thunderstorms possible for Northern Ireland and south of Scotland this evening, and later tonight over South Wales and southwest England. Again, you might get woken up by a rumble of thunder. For most of it, it's just a dry night, a very warm night though. Temperatures really holding up, a sticky one, difficult one for sleeping. 17, 18 the low in most towns and cities, maybe no lower than 19 across parts of South Wales and southwest England. So a warm start to a hot day. A bit more cloud around tomorrow. The sunshine likely to be a little bit hazier compared to today. And again, the chance of 1 or 2 isolated thunderstorms breaking out. Initially over Wales and southwest England, most other areas starting dry. Probably a warmer day tomorrow for Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, quite a few degrees higher the temperatures here. Still quite a bit of cloud at times from an old weather front across parts of the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Then, as I say, as we go through the day, a bit more cloud around, so the sunshine will be a little more hazy, but those temperatures will still tick up. And we could just see again 1 or 2 thunderstorms, very hit and miss. Most places won't see them, but parts of Western England, Wales, and come the afternoon, northern Scotland could just catch a thunderstorm too, as temperatures here get close to 30 Celsius, and further south, widely over 30 degrees across the heart of the country. 31, 32 likely to be the top temperature. Could reach